Welcome to our video series on the path to Nibbana. This is part 9, and today we'll be discussing two concepts called sakayaditthi and anatma. So our mission is to attain Nibbana, and what that means is training our mind to see things as they truly are. There were multiple concepts we have learned so far. Let's quickly look at those. So number one, we learned that we have two main parts. We have a mind and a body. Next, we learned that our body is made out of 4 elements, and everyone else's body is made out of the same 4 elements as well as everything else in the world. Next, we learned that our body is impermanent and is constantly changing, and everyone else's body is impermanent and is constantly changing, and so does everything else in the world. We also learned that our thoughts are impermanent and are constantly changing. Then we learned that any data that comes from the outside world will be received by our main sense organs and will be interpreted by the mind. We went into the great details and the mechanism in part 6 of this video series. In addition, we learned that this process is also impermanent and transient. I'd like to add one more fact to this. Something you have learned already, which is the concept of rupa. We learned in video number 6 that data and the sense organs together is called rupa. Today we will add one more thing to the concept of rupa, which is thoughts in our mind are received by the sense organ called the mind. So in the Buddhist philosophy, the mind itself is a sense organ to receive thoughts. So rupa broadly means data from the outside plus thoughts plus all our sense organs plus the mind. Next, we realize that this unrealistic expectation of wanting things to remain the same is a very foolish one, because everything in the world is impermanent. And because of this expectation, we suffer all the time and causes ourselves a lot of stress. And this stress and suffering is called dukkha. So today we are going to learn 2 more concepts about the mind and the body. One is called sakayaditthi and the other is called anatma. So first, let's look at sakayaditthi. Now, if you just close your eyes for a moment and pause and think, you will have a sense that there is a permanent entity or a permanent boss called me inside ourselves, either in our mind or our body. So this is a sense we all have. Now let's objectively see whether this is an accurate perception and an accurate view to hold. So, in other words, is there a boss called me hiding somewhere in our body? So let's look carefully And when you actually pause and look at our brain, you do not see a boss call me hiding there, especially a permanent one. And then you can look at the face and see, is there a permanent boss call me hiding in the face, the chest, the abdomen, the upper arms and lower legs? You do not see a boss call me hiding anywhere. And then we also know, since we have been now meditating and contemplating, that our body is really made out of the 4 elements. So that too confirms the fact that we do not have a permanent boss called me hiding anywhere in our body. Next, let's look at the mind. And again, in our meditation and contemplation, we have looked at our mind and we have seen that it's full of thoughts, that they come and then they go, and another one comes and then it goes. So in our mind, we have not seen a permanent entity called me either. But we all have this sense. So where is this coming from? To recap, we did not see a permanent boss called me inside the body, the mind, our thoughts, or our feelings. So what is it? So if you really pause and think, you realize that this was a concept that our mind made up. So basically, it's a mental construct. Or, in other words, it is just a collection of thoughts that gives rise to this perception. So, this wrong view, remember the word view, that there is a permanent entity called me inside our mind or body is called sakayaditthi. Ditti means view, and this is the wrong way, because we already saw that ourselves. So this illusion, which is that there is a permanent entity called me inside our body or mind, is called sakayaditthi. So, going back to our basic steps, first we had to know the mind. So in the theoretical concept, now we know that there is no permanent boss called me in the body or the mind. The next thing we have to do is to meditate and actually observe and see this concept, whether we learned, is actually true. So as you contemplate and then look at your body very carefully, and then also look at your mind, you see that in fact this concept is true. So the wrong view you had can be easily eliminated with meditation. And when you do that, which is you eliminate the concept of sakayaditthi, you attain the first stage of Nibbana, which is called Sowan or stream enterer. I'd urge you to go and listen to part 2 of our video series, and things will start making more sense. Next, we will talk about the concept called anatma. So, to go back, now we know that there is no permanent entity called me inside our body or mind. But this sense of self or the perception of self is deeply embedded in us. And if we look back, this is from part 6. And again, I would urge you to please go and listen to that again. But to quickly summarize, in part 6, we talked about thoughts, and we talked about companions to a thought, which are called Chaitasika. And we know that there's 52 of them. And 2 of them, which is Vedana and Sanya, we put them in one room with consciousness, Vijnana, and the other room we called it the department of Sanskara. And if you recall, we talked about a boss in that department. And now you will see that boss is the illusion called me. And it's because of this boss that there is a Chaitasika called Chetana or volition. Again, it's because of this boss that there is a Chaitasika called Tanha or craving. Please, I urge you to go back and listen to that video, and things will start making a lot more sense. Now, continuing with our concept of anatma. So, when data comes in to our mind, they are first acknowledged by vijnana or consciousness. And then it's passed on to sanya or perception. So in sanya, what does sanya do? It compares whatever the new data to an existing database and identifies the new data as, in this case, a yellow rose. This existing database is our memory. And in this database, the concept or the perception of me is deeply embedded. So this is what we'll have to remove and replace with the fact that there is no permanent boss called me. And that's what we are going to do next by retraining our mind, trying to eliminate this highway that we have that says that there is a permanent entity called me. So we have to keep retraining our mind so that this highway slowly disappears. Once we completely eliminate the sense of self, that situation is called anatma. So self is atma. Once we eliminate it, it's called anatma. And that happens in the 4th stage or when we attain Nibbana. So, can we actually remove something from our existing database and replace it? Is this even possible? Well, guess what? We do it all the time. So the answer is yes, we can. So let's take this example. Let's say you had a friend called Miss Tina Smith. And then she got married and she changed her name to Mrs. Tina Jones. So whenever you see her, immediately your mind from your memory database will say Tina Smith. And then you will pause for a second and say, no, she got married and she changed her name. Now she's Tina Jones. So then you will introduce her as Tina Jones. So this will continue to happen. Each time you meet her, the very first thought that comes is Tina Smith. You have to pause, correct it, and introduce her as Tina Jones. But as this continues, especially if you see her daily, slowly but surely, you will start associating her image with the words Tina Jones. And after about 3 months, you might even forget her maiden name because this association has become so strong. So the more you repeat something, the stronger it becomes, and the old pathways die off. Same way, if we keep reminding and retraining our mind about the sense of self, our mind will learn the new path. So, in other words, the more you practice, the better you get. So going through our normal sequence, we've understood the concept. Now we have to figure out how to incorporate it into our meditation. And then you have to keep repeating it until we lose the old path and this path becomes very strong. Let's see how we are going to do that. So we start with a quick recap. You sit comfortably, be in a safe place, complete all your urgent tasks for the day so that you can relax. You start by paying homage to Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, and next you recite the 5 precepts. And as I said before, I personally take a deep breath, let it out slowly, and then put aside all the worries and stresses and decide, okay, I'm going to meditate for X number of minutes. Again, our mind will be like a stormy ocean and we need to make it like a calm lake. So we start with compassion meditation. And now I want you to remind you, remember every time I kept saying, please don't use the word my brain, my face, my neck when you are doing the compassion meditation, but to use the brain, the face, the neck. And the reason is if we kept using the wrong message, which is saying my mind, my brain, well, then we will be highlighting the wrong path. Now you understand why I kept asking you to use the word the brain, the face, the neck. Okay. So after you've done your compassion meditation, you go on to your breath meditation, and then you begin your contemplation. So starting with your brain, you think about the 4-element contemplation. Then you go on to think about everyone else. This is another point I'd like to highlight, which is please don't think of the same person every day. I sometimes make sure you think of multiple people. Otherwise, your mind won't get trained properly. Then you go on to the contemplation on impermanence of the body by thinking of images from childhood to now, and then thinking of someone who has died. Then you think of someone else, and then different parts of the world. Finally, you start observing your mind and realizing that the thoughts themselves are impermanent and constantly changing. Then you go on to the part of the meditation where you see data coming in, received by the sense organs, and then is interpreted by the mind, and also the fact that this too is a impermanent and transient process. Then you pause for a second and contemplate how unrealistic our expectations are. Now we are going to add the final module to our meditation, which is we start checking and scanning our body from the brain, face, chest, abdomen, upper limbs, lower limbs, and ask the mind to carefully check to see whether there's a permanent boss called me hiding in different parts of the body. And at each time you ask the question, and then you conclude that no, there is no boss call me hiding, and then you go on to the next part. Then you look at your mind and watch the thoughts and see, is there a permanent entity called the boss call me hiding there? And the conclusion will also be a big no. This is a third technique because by this time your mind is very quiet and calm and peaceful. So you basically say 3 words and you say it very slowly. So you, in your mind, you say the word I, and you watch your mind while you are saying it, and then you pause and experience the silence, and then you say am, pause, experience the silence, and then say your name. As you say these 3 words slowly, you will notice that they are just words, or they are just thoughts and concepts, and really there was nothing called you inside that thought. And then you could say something like I, pause, am, pause, pause, and then doctor, accountant, housewife, whatever. And again, you start seeing that they are just words or thoughts. Same thing with something like this is my home. So this too confirms that there is no permanent entity called me, and all these things that are called mine, my home, and this and that are all just thoughts. So this technique was recommended by Venerable Ajahn Sumedho. Once now you know all the sequence that you need to meditate on, I usually do about 3 cycles. Sometimes you can mix and match. For example, you can check the body and look at the 4 elements, think of the impermanence of the body, think of the impermanence of your own mind, so on and so forth. So you can mix and match, but each sitting, make sure you do all of these. And the more you do, the better you get, and quicker you'll be able to close this highway, which has 2 main things that we are trying to delete, which is that things are permanent and there is a permanent boss called me within us. Once you eliminate those 2, you will attain Nibbana. So now you know that you can attain Nibbana. Well, that's all for this video. So please stay humble, keep learning, help and nurture each other. And please do take a moment to share this video with like-minded friends. Thank you so much for listening. We hope to see you soon.